Welcome to Teachers Teaching Teachers. It is October 7th, and we've been dancing around the debates. And we're starting this one a little bit early. It's because the presidential debates are at 9 o'clock, which we want to make room for too. But Katherine Schulten just had a book published, or a couple books published. One soft cover, one hardcover. You'll explain. And so we've invited her to come talk to us about raising student voice, making argument. Katherine, you're kind of familiar with the fact that we're formal here. The back and forth that I said to Katherine is that maybe you would do a workshop for us, pretending you're doing a bit of a workshop, showing us how to use the books, talking about them a little bit, and then we'll interrupt. I do want people to go around and say hello though first, if you don't mind, just quickly, where you hail from and how you feel about being here. No, whatever you'd like to say. Just welcome yourself. And there's Anna. Paul, would you start us off?
Sure, I'm Paul. I teach at Silver Creek High School in Sellersburg, Indiana. It's right across the bridge from Louisville, Kentucky, and I teach 2 dual credit courses. So I have a large group of juniors in AP Lang, and I have a smaller cohort of seniors that I'm looping with this year in AP Lit. So that's who we are. I'm excited to be here again.
And let me loop down to Anna. Hello, Anna. You'll see a dragon on the front page of Youth Voices, and that represents Paul's students who are going to be jumping into Youth Voices very quickly. So that's exciting. Anyway, Anna, why don't we pick on you next? Say hello.
Hi, is this just like the normal introduction?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is Anna Main. I teach in Berkeley. I teach high school. I teach a class of English language learners and a couple of sections of American literature. And that's it.
And let me just promote a little bit just to say that Anna and Natalia Navarro have taken the lead in a group that you can get to, youthvoices.live/books. I changed that URL, by the way, recently. It's a public group where it's a book club. It's just sort of started, so kind of excited about that. Tanya, do you want to go next? I'm just pointing to people.
Sure. I'm Tanya Baker. I work at the National Writing Project and live in Berkeley, California. And I am really excited to hear Katherine talk about this work. I have been spending a lot of time talking to teachers about mentor texts and near and far mentor texts. And so this collection, the one book that's a collection of student voice, student writing, is so exciting to me. So can't wait to dig in. That's how I feel about being here, Paul.
Cool. Jessica, do you want to say hello? Say who you are, where you're from, and what you do. You're muted or something.
I'm Jessica. I teach at Pulse High School in the Bronx, which is a transfer high school. I teach English and ENL.
Cool. And we're not going to call on Trisha. She said in the chat that she's multitasking. Jane?
Hi, I'm Jane Higgins. I'm the director of the New York City Writing Project, and I'm always excited to be here. Don't get here enough, but happy to see Katherine. And just thinking, Katherine, I think I met you in 2004.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go back with a lot of people on this call.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's good to see everyone, and I'm excited for the conversation tonight.
Nikki. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Nikki Fain, professor, Lehman College.
Very succinct. Andy. Whoops. Unmute. There you go.
Hi, I'm Andy Starvati, and I teach 8th grade humanities, social studies, and literature at an independent school in Atlanta, Georgia. And I used to teach in Brooklyn, New York.
Cool. I think I got everybody who's here right now. Katherine, do you want to introduce yourself? You are still muted. Yeah, there
I'm
you
muted?
go. Well, I don't know. Your first two words didn't come out.
Oh, well,
Go ahead.
I'm sure there was some throat clearing anyway.
Okay.
I just want to say this is the first first conversation I've had about this book, and it feels really appropriate to me because, as you guys may or may not know, when I was a baby child in 1986, I student taught with Paul Allison, and that's how I was welcomed into the writing project. And
I was in kindergarten. So.
yeah, he was in kindergarten. I was in preschool, and yet we ran a high school classroom together for a semester. Crazy times. Anyway, so it's really feels like, just friends. It's nice to be here. So, but then I went on to teach at Murrow, where I met Andy for 10 years, taught English, worked as a literacy person for the New York City Writing Project for another 9, and then took the job at the New York Times in 2006. So if you're doing the math, it's over 30 years.
And totally transformed the learning network. So it's a pretty exciting place there now.
Well, yes, not alone, but thank you. Yeah.
So do you want to, I don't know, jump into the books right away, or what are you thinking?
Sure. Well, I
Get
just want to know from you guys. Paul sort of threw me when he said run it like a workshop, and I know we're all used to running Zoom workshops now, or you guys all are, but I still don't have an online teaching role. So, I can't like Zoom you people into breakout groups or like put up instant polls or any kind of like magical things. We're just going to do some writing and some talking. But I wanted to start just by asking how many of you, I'm sure Paul, you for one, but I can't tell from the rest of your job descriptions, how many of you guys teach argument now? And if you do, what works for you and what's hard for you? That's kind of what I want to hear about. And if you don't mind, I'm taking notes because this is very useful for me for any of these further ones. So have at it.
Don't be shy, folks. Jump in.
I can go because we're literally working on argumentative writing this week. And I'm going to try and talk and share at the same time. I've used, because I knew this meeting was coming up, I did a little poking around on the Learning Network site. And so I made an assignment for my students. So we're working on an argumentative essay, and I think one of the tensions that I have teaching ELD is that reading can be such a heavy ask for students. And really the goal with an argumentative essay is to get them to write, but you also want them to be able to research and determine what's reliable information. There's just so many skills that go into writing, and a good argumentative essay can take forever, and it's taking forever now. But it's important, and I think sometimes what we do is we narrow the topic and give the students a topic, give them the research so that that's less time that they need to spend, because again, the focus is the writing, and then they end up writing an essay about video games that they don't really care about, or a topic that they're not as invested in. So I was really excited to find all of the choices on the website. So what I've done with my students, we just did this Tuesday, is I narrowed it down to like 30 choices, because there's like hundreds of choices on your website, which is amazing. And then I'm having the students pick a couple that interest them and then do a little bit of research, and then we'll see what's happening from there. So I'm like in the middle, but in the early stages. So I'm so excited to be here. I'm done talking.
Anna, I just want to make sure, I think what you're talking about is our list of argumentative prompts. Is that what you're talking about by the choice?
Yes,
Okay.
and the link I just threw in the chat is the assignment I made. I tried to narrow down the list because 130 was like, or 100 and whatever it is overwhelming. I brought it down to some of the questions I thought would interest my particular group. And so we'll see. We're going to meet again tomorrow and talk about which choices they made, which topics they want to write about.
And is that the same as the 500 prompts in the book?
Yeah, the 500, you guys could see my problem. Just or Norton's problem, really. They were like, wait, is all this already free on the website? So like, why are we putting it in a book, right? So
I
no,
often ask
not
that, but
really.
never mind.
There are versions of lots of things, but the book has 500 prompts that are like, that don't exist. Some of them exist on the site. Some of them are from the last 2 years, which that earlier list doesn't have, et cetera. But let's just say there's plenty of lists in the book and on our site of, because we ask a question every single day on our site that for, like there's one about the debate up right now. And so we just cull those, like Anna was talking about. And a lot of teachers tell us that's the initial spark that gets kids like, oh, look at all these topics. I could pick one of these if they aren't coming up on their own with some. So thanks.
That was an amazing start, but I'm going to continue interrupting and say you call these prompts, but they are questions. Is there any difference between a prompt and a question? Or?
I mean, maybe. Sure. The way we use it, we ask it as a question as the headline, but if you look at it, they're all structured exactly the same way. It's a formula. They come from exactly one Times article. We try not to get fancy and have too many. For a long time now, any high school kid in America can get nytimes.com for free, but before that was true, our site was the only way in. So that made that article free, and it gave kids, like, we excerpt a little of it so they have to read the whole thing and then ask additional questions. It was just kind of like an on-ramp to get kids into thinking about topics, and if you've looked at the list, there's some nonsense on there, and then there's some super serious topics, and it's kind of a mix. So
cool. Do you want to repeat your original question and maybe somebody else jump in?
Yes.
Yeah.
And hello, Kieran. Good to see you.
Hi.
So we're in the middle of talking about if anybody already teaches argument and what works and what's hard for them. And so far we've heard from Anna.
So I like that Paul actually pushed on the idea of prompt versus question, because that's where we are right now working with the AP samples when we talk about Tim Freitas's Garden of English, that command and conquer, how you look at a prompt and discern what it is you're supposed to do and for what purpose. And we're learning even in rhetorical analysis that everything is an argument. And so you're arguing for something in the text. And what we're noticing is a lot of our students who lack experience in argumentation are going for like the low-hanging fruit. We taught them the rhetorical appeals, and they think that they're holding on to some golden kernel that they never had before. So now everybody uses ethos, pathos, and logos. We struggle with this every single year. But when we finally get to the argument response that AP asks for in the spring, I really like that acronym REHUGO, because sometimes when you make an argument, it's hard to know where to situate it. I think it always starts with us. The argument starts within me. But knowing that there's REHUGO in me gives me a stance. I can choose from a number of footings that I might come out in an argument when I know that, when I have something in place. And I don't know that maybe we don't talk about REHUGO a whole lot with our students, or maybe the audience may not know what that acronym is, but most of us that taught AP for a while know about REHUGO. And once our kids know it, they're able to like anchor an opinion in something that has some real roots. I see people nodding appreciatively. So
will you explain to everybody what it is? Because I only came across that term researching for this book, and I left it out because it seemed to me so AP specific.
Yeah, I think, let me see if I can run through without embarrassing myself. But I think it's reading, entertainment, history, the universe, government. Am I okay?
Yep.
And then I think the O is a personal opinion, where we build in that opinion piece after we've built in everything else. So
Observation.
The ego piece was the old SAT. Karen?
I was saying observation at the end, which is different from opinion. But maybe it becomes the same in AP.
Right. No, I think it is observation. I like these little pushes on the terms that we're using, because it's really a matter of, it's not just semantics. It's like, it's a position, it's a situation. It's how you settle yourself into the task of writing, whether that was a prompt, a question, or even a provocation. You know, sometimes it's a provocation when you weren't thinking about that thing at all until the question lands on your desk. You're like, oh, that's a thing. There's 500 things that I'm not thinking about as I sit here claiming writer's block.
Wow, Paul.
I know. Where do you start? I don't.
Yeah, where do you even start?
Let me throw in that one of the things that I'm interested in. You won't be surprised is how argument changes when youth aren't writing for the teacher anymore and are writing for their peers and or for publication or whatever. So that's a key, I think, to making all this work. Just to move, it moves off the formulas then to like actually wanting to get something from your audience in some way.
And Paul, do you want to talk about that a little in terms of youth voice? Because I don't think maybe everybody except Andy knows about that, but I'm not sure. Like,
it's cool. I mean, what I'll mention on youth voices is that what's totally interesting, I think, is that you don't just publish one time, like you build argument over time and you publish about the issue you're talking about when it works well, like every week for 5 weeks or something. And so the argument kind of builds and it builds with other voices involved in it too. So that's kind of the magic of it, I think.
Yeah, that's really, right now on our site, we're running something where we're trying to do that, but it's hard. It's our civil conversation challenge where we did it for 2016. We're doing it for 2020 ahead of the election. Like, adults can't seem to have these conversations across political divides, but maybe you guys can. And it's ones we picked, immigration, guns, things like that in 2016. 4 years later, we wanted to pick more stuff that the country's currently arguing about.
Those are the two big ones in letters to the president too, by the way. But
yeah, you mean currently or in 2016?
In 2016.
Yeah, and then we felt like those positions had just hardened and they weren't even that interesting for kids to, you're just going to spew talking points really, or maybe they wouldn't because kids aren't that way, but we thought we'd pick something that's just like roiling us right now. So we did coronavirus response, right, and the leadership around that, obviously. Ongoing. We did race, of course. We picked education because every kid is right now considering what disrupting education looks and feels like. And we did, why can I not remember the four? Oh, voting rights. So it felt like those all felt and the idea is that kids keep coming back to this forum and everybody, I think this is impossible because hundreds of kids are participating, but maybe not. Our hope is that the kids get to know each other and that they read each other's and have a real conversation. And at the end, we read thousands and thousands of posts and kind of honor the coolest conversations that we find in terms of like, it got somewhere, that conversation got somewhere. I don't know what that looks like because I haven't figured that out yet, but I'm assuming we will when we read it. So that sounds like what, youth voices can do. And
yeah, I want other people to talk too, but just to put a pin into that notion of kids getting to know each other, especially now, given how much the learning is remote, we've put a big effort on Youth Voices to build this profile system where kids can kind of hang out and meet each other and just talk. So, yeah, that feels important. You need to know who you're publishing to, right? So, yeah. But others with, what do you love about, what do you love about argument teaching?
Well, it's
what are the troubles?
Like what works and what's hard for you.
Yeah. Andy, do you want to jump in there? I'm gonna call on you.
Sure, teach. Okay. I'm with the 8th graders for the most part. I even have some 7th graders, but I'm mainly with 8th graders. And, they've had maybe one research paper in their educational career at our school. And they're used to, if they can write, they can write anything they want. It's, there's generally speaking aliens involved. So it's really easy to get them to be passionate. even young teenagers have a very innate sense of fairness and right and wrong. So just getting them to have an opinion and name some emotionally based reasons for that opinion, like all of us, that's the easy part. Getting them to tie it to evidence and getting them to take an anecdote that feels real to them, like something, and show them how, in order to create a rich essay on this, they need to pull back the lens, incorporating that evidence. And so one of the things I really like about this book, I read the kids, my second week of school, I read to them, I started a civics class that I'm teaching called Vision 2020. And I read to them the essay about how we have to, Thanksgiving's sort of a nightmare now, and how we have to learn how to talk to each other at the Thanksgiving table. And given the age that I teach, all I told them ahead of time is, I'm going to read you an essay that someone wrote about how we have to get along better at the Thanksgiving table. The author is 15 years old. Did everyone hear that? She's 15. Because I knew once I started reading it, they would really connect to. And then afterwards, we had a long discussion about how did she get there? She's only 2 years older than they are. How did she manage to write this? So then after that, we sort of broke down the components. But they have a ways to go with all of that.
Which essay is that? Can we be text specific here?
What is it called? Catherine, you've memorized the names of all the essays.
I know, honestly, and it's this darling girl named Bridget Smith who's Dinner Table Politics. If you've got the book, is on page 68.
Thank you. Yes.
The Thanksgiving table is a war zone. The soldiers, the conservative aunt who drove all the way from Alabama, the ultra progressive sibling who makes passive aggressive comments while passing the potatoes, and of course the grandparents who stubbornly reference the good old days when political incorrectness roamed free. That's the opening line. So you can see that one, and many of them are really voicey and get your attention instantly. And I will say that was kind of our goal in starting this. This comes from a contest that we run annually since 2014. And we started it because we could see that the Common Core was making every single human in America write argumentative essays across the curriculum. And the New York Times, of course, publishes a daily section of argumentative essay and, the opinion section. And we thought, this is a great match. And we can get kids to kind of look at a very short and very, a form that makes you want to read on and not think of it. Like, I think if you're a teacher and you're teaching writing, you're excited when you get to the personal essay. You're excited when you're doing poetry or short story. But maybe when you get to the argumentative essay, you're crying just a little bit. Like Anna Main said, maybe you're like, oh, this is going to take a long time and there's a lot to it. So the essays are all 450 words long, and that we've heard from teachers is the huge benefit of them because they're quick to read, they're quick to show your kids, they teach them a lot in trying to be concise. But just to tell you a story about, how this whole book came to be is that very first year, we didn't know what we would get. Like we thought maybe we'd get, standardized test style essays. But one of the winners that year was this Canadian boy, Noah Spencer, God bless him, who wrote, his headline was, "Why I, a heterosexual teenage boy, want to see more men in Speedos." And it was a whole essay about the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition and how female athletes were objectified, but men weren't, and how that kind of disgusted him, even as he was sort of attracted to it. It was a darling essay, and I think the fact that it won right away showed kids in all the subsequent years that, it didn't have to be this buttoned up form. And we've since had a lot of kids kind of imitate that. Why I, a blank, want to see something counterintuitive, which that's fine. We love it. Like, let them be mentors for each other. So. That
was a great sentence frame there. Can we write that down?
Yeah. Exactly. We now actively discourage that because we get so many every year. And there's a couple of ones in the book. Why I, a high school football player, want to drop the sport or something like that. Anyway, so.
Cool. I want to give just a little room for anybody who wants to throw another issue that hasn't come up yet at Catherine, and then maybe we can get at looking at one specific example.
Yeah,
Does
I'd
that
love
sound
to.
right? Yeah. So this is a little time for if you wanted to say something from a teacher or you work with teachers or whatever perspective about what's good about argument and what's hard about it. Looks like we've given enough time.
All right. Well, I asked Paul if he'd play a video for you, but I want to give you the backstory.
I'm
So
ready.
okay, good. I could only reach some of the kids for this book because it's too long and boring a story to explain the New York Times privacy requirements, but let's just say I couldn't reach everybody. So the few kids I could reach that I did interview were brilliant. They were my favorite part of writing this book, of course, because what English teacher wouldn't say that, right? You call the kids and they're just so real and they're so funny about why they chose to write what they chose to write and, you know, what they didn't write and et cetera. But this one young woman, Asaka Park, and you're about to hear from her, wrote the essay that is the third essay in the book, and it's page 8. And it's called I'm a Disabled Teenager and Social Media is My Lifeline. And I'm going to put if you don't have the book, I'll put the link up because then we'll look at it. But I'll tell you a little something about her after Paul shows you the video. So Paul, go ahead.
Okay. I hope I marked everything correctly here and we can play. Give me a thumbs up if you hear anything.
My name is Asaka Park and I wrote the editorial, I'm a disabled teenager and social media is my lifeline. In full disclosure, I'm literally reading from a script and I've rehearsed this at least 10 times. So like when I first wrote that piece, I wrote it out of desperation. In hindsight, like it's not my most uplifting piece, but there's a sense of urgency, this sense of momentum, and there's power in that, I think. I'm glad that I turned my pain into something productive and something that starts a broader conversation instead of just keeping it inside.
Very short video. And let me let you look at, before I say anything else, let me let you look at her actual piece, which you can find.
Any quick reactions to the video though? Any thoughts? Anybody want to jump in?
Well, I think it's interesting just reading Anna's most recent comment about how voice disappears. So clearly what we're about to read is their voice is very strong, I'm anticipating, given her passion around talking about it.
All right, does somebody want to read it out loud? Should we all read it quietly? How do you do it, Paul?
That sounds, no, let's read it out loud. You were doing a lovely job reading. Did you want to share it?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
Oh, do you want to share your screen?
Oh.
You can do that.
Well,
I don't know if you want to.
I'm afraid I'll never come back. I'm just not as Zoom worthy as you guys. Will you share it, Paul, since it's in the
I
chat?
will try to do that. Yep. I'm happy to do that. I think if I can, yeah. Is that the right one? Are we there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do this. Would somebody volunteer to read it?
I would.
Great, Karen. Thank you.
Oh, can I ask you to do something while you listen? I'm running ahead a little bit. If this is a pain for you, don't do it. But this is something we've done in webinars. Just think about the writer's moves that you notice that you wish your kids could do. It's that simple. If that's confusing, though, just listen as Karen reads.
I'm a disabled teenager, and social media is my lifeline. I'm keenly attuned to the unwritten rules of social interaction. I can identify the subtle variations in people's facial expressions, and I'm quick to read between the lines. And my discernment is not just on an intellectual level, but also on an intuitive level. I'm intimately familiar with the dance of social interaction. The information that I just provided sounds like a mundanity until I tell you that I was diagnosed with autism. I defy the stereotypes of someone who can't possibly get it socially. No one knows that I can. I can get it. Of course, people don't see that. I struggle with impulsivity. My physical clumsiness makes it hard for me to maintain appropriate facial expressions and tone of voice. While I easily grasp abstract concepts, I often can't convert them into tangible step-by-step actions, making it difficult to communicate gracefully. Even the untrained eye notices these challenges, and they confound my social faux pas as a failure to understand or share other people's expectations. Okay, somebody else take over.
I can go.
Great.
I'm depleted. Every day at
Thanks,
school, I isolate myself from most of my peers. It's a matter of time before they make these assumptions, before they postulate how my brain works. On social media, though, I'm a completely different person. I'm dynamic, I'm assertive, I'm people-oriented. Many claim that social media distracts teens from meaningful, genuine interactions. My experiences, however, are the total opposite of that. Cultivating my own space on the internet helped me thrive outside the pigeonhole. Namely, I use my blog to explain the real reason why I act the way I do. Even though not everyone will understand, I know some people will, and it gives me tremendous hope. I know I'm not the only one. For many disabled people, social media gives them access to a social life and community involvement in an otherwise inaccessible world. Not only does social media give me the platform to correct assumptions, people don't assume things about me in the first place because it's a level playing field. For example, when I tweet, my addled movements are replaced by various emojis and reaction GIFs, which gives me a vaster palette to express myself. Furthermore, I've learned to extend the conversation on disability from my own personal circumstances to the broader issue of ableism. Don Hapscott, a media consultant, remarked, "Teens didn't grow up being the passive recipients of someone else's broadcast. This definitely resonated with me. I used to feel alone, not seeing girls like me on the magazine covers, not anymore. In a click, I can create my own media where people with disabilities are seen and heard rather than pliantly consuming the media that routinely devalue people with disabilities."
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks. It's your workshop, Catherine. What do you
All
want
right,
us to do?
sorry, yes. So yeah, reactions to anything that you just heard.
I mean, I'm used to thinking that there is almost nothing good about social media interaction anymore. So I'm glad to be wrong about that in a certain way. I've always thought that I mean, the way we use it here, I mean, I can even see some uses for forums and whatnot, but yeah, I've gotten more negative about social media, and this is a really good way of seeing how it can be positive.
I mean, first of all, I just have to gush and say I really love it. But I also have to say that I think that in some of the schools where we have worked and continue to work, I think some of the APs might say this isn't an argument.
Can you
And
talk about that?
if I, were to support a teacher and a student in this writing, that they might get some really strong pushback. Which obviously is, destructive and troubling, but it is what I see. That an argument is it's drier, and even topically they might say, not so much. I think the way in which the writing project tries to support teachers in argument is to start from that place where argument is everywhere and in everything and in all writing, which seems like a very easy concept. And I think most teachers and then students can grasp that, but I'm not sure those tracking the data do.
I think the thing I would point to as like a potential way in which this text may not fit that mold of an argument is like, at least from what I get from Common Core, is like there's such a huge emphasis on integrating evidence, selecting, and that was like the one part of this that I would say was not her strongest point was the kind of dropped the quote in right at the end, and didn't really introduce it or frame it in a way that was super easy for me to understand. However, the structure was super interesting. I assigned a very similar prompt about social media to students, and like we, followed this very like structured format, and this is just much more interesting to read. So one thing that stood out to me was like the pacing, because the structure was more open. She like had these long sentences and these long paragraphs, and then the short sentences. It just was really like enjoyable to read.
So I wonder to what degree we may call that piece a literature-based position statement versus an argument, because I think at the end of an argument, we're looking for the available means of persuasion that an audience would think, do, be, want to see a change in policy. I think what I walk away with after reading the piece and listening to the piece is a certain appreciation for what somebody else found as a position statement, but may not necessarily be my experience. I wonder if just the little push out there may not be an advocacy for increased instruction or exposure to text, outside of social media. One of the people I'm thinking about right now as I read the young lady's essay here is Shane Burkaw, right, who's part of an interabled relationship on Instagram. He's written a number of books. One's called Laughing at My Nightmare. Ask Me Anything just won the Schneider Award a couple years ago. So I just wondered, like, in that argument with the young lady, had she more exposure to that literature, to those award winners like the Schneider family that comes out like every single year, if that wouldn't have helped to inform her position, or I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say on that. It's just at the end, I think I agree with Jane. The think, do, be part for me is absent from the piece as a summary comment, and I think I agree with Anna too. I think we would probably steer our students away from dropping in that. It's kind of like a drop quote at the end. We don't know how that works back in. But as far as writerly moves, let's celebrate some writerly moves. I do see those singular sentences coming out, and the repetition of get it. And there's definitely some voice in here, and she does have a strong position. But Jane, I really appreciate you stepping out tonight and like going, well, is it, when we call it something, is it? Are we being completely accurate and fair in presenting those to our students at in our schools? So.
Well, I mean, I want to be clear. I actually push back really hard on that, and in terms of hybridity and genre and what it all means and how important is it anyway, and ultimately, where are we taking this? What is it that I'm actually trying to teach you? Mm-hmm. So I'm no longer in my own classroom with young people, but I'm teaching teachers. And I always try to start from a place of trying to understand how we form an argument, just even alone in our thinking. And I mean, I love Hillocks, so I love starting there with, let's look at that silly cartoon and figure out how the guy died. Right? It's a murder scene. And kids love that, and teachers love it. And so what do you think okay, now gather evidence. So you have an opinion, but so what does the evidence do to shape that? And I think that kind of training is entirely worthwhile. And I think she has gone through this process herself. Now, okay, maybe her evidence isn't as clear, but in some way it is, because she thought so carefully about how she's interacting with social media through her diagnosis of autism. So she's actually, in some regard, creating her own pool of evidence. I mean, she's definitely, you know, touching on something that's beyond just the feels, which, you know, right, that, you know, I try to teach my teachers, don't ask them to turn in the thesis statement before they've seen any evidence, you know, and so I just want to be clear, like, I think this is a wonderful piece, and I think she's positioning an argument and has some great writerly moves for such a young person that I'm like, go for it, open the gates, what else can you do? So, I think it brings, argument for me always brings these big hairy questions about, well, what is it? Why are we doing it? Who said it's so important? Where did all of this come from? And, you know, I feel like when kids are writing about themselves, they are positioning the ultimate argument.
Also, like, wouldn't we say historically, like, if we think about the place we are in our country right now, like, we have to honor evidence that comes from your lived experience. Like, we see voices raised all the time saying, there's nobody else saying that. Like, we are living awash in the most important voices saying, the literature does not represent my experience. Like, my experience, I'm going to say back. And every time I see a new person tell me something that I didn't understand because of my own positionality, I'm like, shit, I'm so stupid. Like, I think this is a really powerful, I mean, I understand, separating out the school questions of what counts as evidence and the range of moves we want to make kids, we want to empower kids to be able to make. This young person has said, you know, has projected a counter argument that social media is bad and has said, you don't understand my lived experience. And then she has, I think, built out like a pretty impressive argument that doesn't just say some generalities, but then it's layers of a beautiful paragraph of very specific examples of her lived experience, which is evidence, right?
Right. And I just feel like anytime you can push back against David Coleman, right? I'm there for it.
But I would also say, you know, David Coleman would say, nobody gives a shit how you feel, but she's gone well beyond saying how I feel.
Exactly. Right. But I think he's also diminishing the power of that, of the narrative, right? And so I totally agree with you. And I just, what I'm saying is, I think it's too bad that the AP and the schools don't value this writing as being so powerful and not observing the writer here and the moves that she's making. And because, you know,
yeah. Nikki has her hand up.
What a great lesson what a great lesson you're kind of sort of demonstrating right now. If you gave a bunch of high school kids this essay and one which essentially uses the sentence frames on the one hand, on the other hand, you know, all the sort of standard things that get you high, you know, a lot of credit on, you know, argumentative essays, and get kids to grapple with what is evidence, who's convinced you. And, you know, I think there'd be a really, really wonderful kind of discussion that would help kids understand that sometimes you write for publics that grade you in very predictable ways, and you need to use external evidence that you can cite, and that's very academic, all right? And then there's sometimes you write something like this, which just, no one knows what's inside of autistic individuals' heads, and as a result, what one autistic, adolescent or adult says may bear no resemblance to what another autistic adult is going to garner up as evidence. So I think that you do both, and then adolescents are really capable of kind of thinking about this by looking at contrast essays.
Can I jump in real quick?
Please.
Thank you. I had no idea this is where this discussion would go, but this is so useful. And yes, you guys are also, I love listening to you. I took a bunch of essays to a high school of kids I'd never met in Newburgh, New York. They were AP Lang kids. And we know AP Lang kids, they know all the Greek words for all the moves. Right? So they read a whole bunch, and this is the one they chose, which is why I chose to send it to you. Plus, I love Asaka's video. I'll be honest. I asked a ton of kids to cut videos, and hers was so short and clear. They said, the one I learned the most from, the one that is the most convincing to me is this one. I never thought of those things. This is gonna change the way I think about people that I meet who are, not neurotypical. And they just went on and on about it. And I was like, wow, because I do talk in the book about how this isn't, for AP Lang. This is the model for this is what's in the New York Times. And most of the judges for this contest every year are judges off the opinion section who are judging for, do I want to keep reading your piece? And are you telling me stuff I've never heard before, or a new perspective that's interesting and new to me? And do I end up caring in the end? And of course, evidence is part of that. If they use some kind of evidence that's, either there isn't any at all, or, it's suspect in some way or whatever, then that essay never makes it to the next round. But this is a much more holistic way of looking at, was I moved? Was I convinced? What do I want to, we have a whole rubric. Sorry?
Do I want to behave or do something different? Because I know that. Yeah.
Right. Even if there isn't can I say what the call to action was? Maybe not always. Is there always a counter argument? Where is that thesis? Is it, or claim, or whatever you want to call it? So there are about 5 essays in this book that are pretty traditional, but they probably still wouldn't even satisfy Jane, every, et cetera.
Okay.
And thank God that wasn't my criteria. But I also did kind of what maybe one of you guys said, which is I wrote a fake essay to give kids to say, let's pretend you open the newspaper and you read an essay, and it's some terrible fake thing that I wrote about, women being discriminated against in the media. And then I said, but then you see another essay across from it, and it's why I, a heterosexual teenage boy, which one are you going to read? Like, which one is really going to get you? So there is, certainly all the tension that you guys have just talked about, which might make it hard to use these in school. Certainly, I'm not saying not, but
school's a big place.
School's a big place, yeah. And I feel like the writing project sees argument too. I mean, what's the end goal of it? Like, I think, Jane, you were saying so eloquently, why are we doing this in the first place? You're trying to create change of some sort. So, yeah.
Anyway. Can you get a little more specific? You said you wrote about this essay. Did you write about this essay in the paperback? And
yeah, the paperback is where I interviewed all the kids.
Explain that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also, Nick Kristof, the op-ed columnist, let me just tell you guys, that guy is every bit the mensch he appears to be on paper in real life. Because if the Learning Network, we are the most rinky-dink part of the New York Times, right? We're never even in print. But if we ever say, hi, Nick, do you think you could be on a webinar with students? He's always like, what day is it? I'll be there. And he's fantastic. So he's done a few webinars with us. And I said, can I quote you throughout this book? And I mean, I just feel like he's a pretty good authority. And he said to kids in our webinar, and it's in the little paperback part, your lived experience is evidence. You just, Tanya, what you were saying, like you have authority on these things that you experience. Maybe it's about, you know, breaking up with somebody, or maybe it's about high school football or whatever, but you have a kind of authority that people that aren't your age don't have. And that's, you use it in your piece as evidence to help us have a window into your world. So, yeah.
I was
So
struck.
oh,
sorry.
go ahead, Paul.
I was struck by how the essay is not one argument, right? It is about the neurodiversity stuff, and it's about social media. And I was okay with it being about both in an interesting way. And I think often we ask youth to say, okay, what is your question, right? And that's probably a mistake. But yeah. Somebody else want to jump in there?
Well, I was gonna go ahead, Paul.
Can I jump in? I know
Yeah,
we've had sessions before where we talked about our multi-genre, multimodal project that we do in room 407 that encompasses and comprises about 35 to 40 different pieces of writing that come together in a binder style presentation at the end of the year. So when I'm looking at this particular essay, whether it's an argument or not, what I see is it's actually one of the genres that we invite that's called entry into the project. And it's a really quick piece that we do at the very beginning before we start doing the various genre forms and exploring, like maybe another expository piece that may be embedded later in the project. But that really reads to me like what we're doing in Southern Indiana with that entry into the project. How do you come into this subject? So when I see that essay, I see it situated as a part of a bigger piece that is not here, but I can visualize the wraparound that if this young lady were in room 407, we'd have her just continuing through that portal that she's already created.
And by the way, that's an easy answer to the AP too. Like, yeah, this one doesn't do what you want it to do, but the next one will. You know?
Next time.
Seriously. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to say I didn't jump in at the beginning about what's hard. I haven't been in a classroom myself for a long time, but I do have a 20-year-old daughter who has 2 high school English teachers for parents who like hated school until like, you know, I kind of dragged her and kept saying, when you get to college, you're gonna be happy, you know, and it was like she really hated school, and she's my favorite education critic. One thing that she said really clearly once in a conversation we were having about this is, in school, they either give you stupid stuff to do and you spend way too much time on it, or they give you interesting stuff to do and not enough time to do it.
Wow.
And I feel like I was on the phone with her last week. She was in tears because she's taking this class on the Constitution, and she was writing this argument. And she said, here's my problem. I've written a great argument and this one isn't great, and I can't find my way into it. And the difference between having to turn this paper in, that's fine, and the sense that I've really said something new that's mine, is like that wrestling, being in this moment of having to turn this thing in, that's so what I'm rambling, but I think the thing I would have said before at the beginning of this is, I think the hardest thing with young writers is to believe that they have to unschool them enough for them to write with the confidence of the authority of their experience. Like we spend so much time saying you don't have anything valuable to say until you've read what everybody else has to say, you know. So an essay like this, that's like, you might then put this girl into conversation with a bunch of other writing about social media and as a teacher, right, about social media and autism, and like reading more on both sides and figuring out, where does my voice fit at the table of people talking about these issues. But, you know, the reason I had to wrestle my daughter through school was because nobody valued the authority of her experience, and she just felt like she was doing a bunch of stupid work for other people.
And Chris Sloan isn't here tonight, but he's the one who kind of put into our network this notion of a response to a piece of writing often includes what Paul Hankins suggested there, like, have you read this? Have you read that?
Right.
Right. So teaching each other, teaching youth to respond to each other with that kind of response is really brilliant, I think. And I think, yeah. So that's the kind of response I would love for this writer to get. So here are the other things you could read about this and how this, how you could continue your inquiry.
I'm curious for like, how do we think, how do we think that youth voices is like, to what extent are we succeeding in youth voices at occasioning, like at creating conditions for kids to arrive at an opinion or share an opinion and then build it through back and forth with replies into an argument, and then receive responses in the form of articles, connections from Chris's kids, for instance.
Yeah.
And to build how to use your, it's like how to use a writing group. Like, are you using your group? Well, here's the Youth Voices is a bigger group.
Yeah, with 2 minutes to go here, we're going to throw this back to Katherine and leave that as a really good question. The one thing I would say is that I think we've learned over the years that short, quick is necessary, and like you can't wait till it's the perfect argument or it's going to be, you know, it's anyway. So I'll just say that little piece, or there's not enough interaction going on then, I think. That's one thing that comes to mind. But Katherine, back to you.
My God,
I know,
guys.
There's an argument
It's already
happening in a
been
couple
an
of
hour.
minutes.
We were going to write together in my fantasies. I had a whole thing for us where we all thought about the topics we went to. All right, but that didn't
We
happen.
should come back.
Yeah, but how great. This is honestly such a thrill for me. And I took furious notes because, yeah, anyway, it's a warm up because I have to do a lot of little things like this and it scares me and I don't like it. You guys are decidedly unscary and just fantastic. So I really appreciate it. Now we all have to go watch Argument in Action on our.
We do, don't we?
But keep the in those little things, keep the focus on student voice. So, you know, be confident that that's one thing I would say. I mean, it's lovely to hear you talk too. I just, yeah, I just loved hearing the essay. That was great.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, I've got videos galore and essays galore. So
good.
All right.
So exciting.
In the chat, I put a link to where the sorry, you'll get last word, to where you can go on Now Comment, either right now while it's live and annotate it, or later if you want to do something else first and then go back there and annotate it. Anna Main, for example, went in a day later and annotated that last debacle that happened.
Yeah,
time to process. Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So anybody who can jump over there and join us on Now Comment, please do that whenever you can or would like to. Thank you, Katherine.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to say thank you or whatever?
Thanks,
Open your mics and
I
say.
want to say thank you. I remember when you got the job, and I regularly use you as a resource.
Oh, Jessica.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you.
By the way, Jessica and I have a student who we think only speaks Spanish, but on social media, on Youth Voices and so forth, her English is amazing.
Google Translate.
Because
she puts everything.
So there's a problem or an issue with remote learning that we haven't looked at before. Anyway, so hi. We should say goodbye. Thank you very much, y'all.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.